A few weeks ago, one of my channel members asked if I could make a Hexen video, and it didn't take long before I got completely pulled into the franchise's history, where it came from, how it evolved. I ended up playing Hexen 2, learned what the original idea for it was if John Romero hadn't left id Software, and found out there's even a Heretic 2. Yeah, I had no idea either. So let's go back in time, to when first-person shooters weren't even a genre yet, and video games started to be seen as more than toys for kids.
And I say to you, my brothers and sisters, hell is a deep, dark, foul-smelling prison of the damned.
We now require warning labels on toys that can potentially damage children's bodies.
Many video games, the object is to kill your opponent.
Why not do so on a toy that can damage their minds?
When you're watching a TV show, you're a witness to an act of violence. When you play one of these games, you are the murderer. You have your hand on the trigger.
Doom Clones was the 1990s catch-all label for early first-person shooters that followed the success of id Software's Doom in December 1993. For several years, magazines and players used Doom Clone as the default name for the genre that we now call first-person shooter. The phrasing faded in the late 90s as FPS became standard. More recently, a new term was introduced for games that take a lot of inspiration from those retro titles: boomer shooters. The term stuck because Doom exploded not only through its fast-paced, action-heavy gameplay, but also because it popularized a new way of marketing games thanks to shareware. It also pushed LAN play and multiplayer to new heights with deathmatch.
Whoops! It's like you're lying down, boy!
Setting the standard for speed, level flow, and carnage. Anything with a similar viewpoint and gunplay ended up grouped under its shadow, driving a flood of lookalikes and competitors across both PC and consoles. Duke Nukem 3D,
Shake it, baby.
Blood, Star Wars Dark Forces, and even that weirdly fun one, Chex Quest. Yet one of the most familiar games that comes to mind when talking about Doom clones is, without a doubt, the Heretic series. Heretic was developed by Raven Software and published by id Software. It was released in March 1994, 3 months after the launch of Doom. id had some clear ideas about what they liked in games, and since they were the ones providing the technology, Raven listened closely to what they said. Raven was previously known for RPG titles like Black Crypt and Shadowcaster, so their original vision for Heretic was centered more around those roots. This would have brought it closer to what Doom was originally envisioned to be in the Doom Bible. But then our Lord and Savior Carmack opened his arms and said, "Just do it like Doom." And thus, Heretic was born. On the surface, you could sum up the game as medieval Doom, which, funny enough, is pretty much what we're getting now. What really sets this game apart, and something I truly wish more games today would use, is the item system. Okay, little story, I grew up playing Star Wars Jedi Knight 2. One of the best parts of that game is how you have all those Jedi powers, and you can scroll through them and use them on the fly. So when I saw Heretic, I was like, oh shit, this is where it comes from. This is where they got the idea. And then my stupid brain saw who made both games and I was like, yeah, that checks out. So Heretic has a similar system, but with items. You can explore and find a bunch of different things that help you fight those enemies. You have the time bomb, which you can drop like a mine to deal heavy damage. You have my favorite, the morph ovum, which transforms enemies into chickens. There's even an item that grants you the power of flight, something Doom never allowed since it kept you glued to the ground. There's a good amount of enemy variety, and the weapons are all the classics, just given a fantasy twist. The level can feel a bit maze-like, but wait until we get to Hexen, you'll find these easy in comparison. Each episode ends with a boss fight featuring monsters that later become recurring enemies in the following ones, like the Liches and the Molotor. Yet, the most important, and one of the biggest aspects of what makes Heretic memorable, is the Tome of Power. After reading one, for 40 seconds, your weapon unlocks secondary fire modes that are incredibly powerful. For example, the Dragonclaw now shoots projectiles that split into rings of spiked energy. The Hellstaff creates a cloud of raining blood that deals area damage, and even your Palpatine gauntlets now drain enemies to restore your health. So, okay. For a while, Doom was believed not to be true 3D, instead being called 2.5D. But that was debunked by our favorite ace programmer, John Romero, who confirmed it was indeed 3D. I don't know much about coding or game engines, but from what I understand, it was 3D. They just added some heavy limitations to make it run on as many computers as possible. Those limits made the engine less demanding, which is why you could only look left and right, and why rooms couldn't be placed on top of each other. Heretic did something really interesting. It removed that limitation, letting players look up and down. It wasn't super smooth, but you could finally do it. Overall, the game was very well received, so much so that they quickly started working on a sequel soon after release. Hexen Beyond Heretic arrived in 1995, and as soon as you step into the first level, any remaining idea that you're playing a Doom clone is thrown out the window. The atmosphere is far more developed, with certain levels featuring mist or even leaves blowing in the wind. The game pushed the design further toward the RPG, without actually being one.
My servants can smell your blood, human.
The game was praised for popularizing the use of a hub system, where you had to move back and forth between levels to find keys, secrets, and items. Another major addition was the introduction of classes, the fighter, the cleric, and the mage, each with different stats, weapon options, and unique abilities tied to certain power-ups. The most obvious example is the Fléchette. Those green potion bottles behave differently depending on your character. The fighter throws them as bombs, the cleric uses them as poison mines that linger for several seconds, super useful in choke points, and the mage drops them like the original version, where they explode after a short delay. The game's enemy roster is a bit disappointing, with only 12 basic enemy types, some of which reuse the same model with small variations. To be fair, that's my biggest gripe with the game, the lack of variety. You don't have many weapon options for each character, and the enemies start to feel repetitive. I would have thought they could have brought in some creatures from Heretic and mixed them with the new ones. The most surprising part is that they didn't include the Tome of Power, which could have helped by giving each weapon an alternate attack mode. The two-headed Etins are the most common monsters you'll encounter. They have a good amount of health, their attacks don't deal much damage, but you'll encounter them frequently across all levels, and they can also spawn randomly while you're exploring the maps. The imps are now called Afrits. They're fast and shoot fire projectiles in rapid burst. In the frozen regions, you'll run into Wendigos, creatures of frost that hurl shards of ice which fragment on impact, much like the Liches in Heretic. Desperal's mounts make a comeback, now appearing as standard enemies. The green ones shoot fireballs, while the brown ones fire high-damage gas projectiles. The Centaur is a tough son of a bitch. It has a solid amount of health and can block range attacks, forcing you to close in for melee combat, with the Slaughter variant able to shoot energy blasts from its shield. Then there's the Stalker. I hate those assholes. Swamp creatures that hide underwater and leap out to ambush you. The Disciples of Desperal return as Dark Bishops, slightly weaker but capable of moving at high speed with their magic. Finally, the Rivers appear in the cemetery, firing flaming skulls that can siphon health from their targets. The bosses are a bit of a letdown. The first one is the Death Wyvern. It looks like a tough opponent at first, especially since you fight it in a massive cavern filled with lava and chaos serpents, but once you grab the flight power-up, you can just ignore it and fly straight to the exit. The second boss is a bit more challenging. You encounter the Heresiarch twice. He looks like a Dark Servant, but purple, with around 5,000 hit points. 3 cubes float above him and he uses them to cast different spells, making himself invincible, shooting waves of projectiles, or summoning Dark Bishops to his side. The next 3 bosses are Zedek, Traductus, and Menelkir, 3 humans who sided with Korax. They represent the game's 3 character classes and are fought through the final hub, each equipped with the most powerful weapon of their respective class. The final boss is one tough son of a bitch. Korax has multiple attacks, tons of health, can activate traps, and summons waves of enemies to back him up. To sum up, Hexen is a good game. By today's standards, it might fall into the overly cryptic switch hunting category, but the gameplay is solid, the graphics are great, and the challenge is there. What really disappointed me was the limited variety. Enemies, only 4 weapon options per class, and no access to the Tome of Power made combat feel a bit restricted. Hexen 2 was originally the working title for John Romero's project Hecatomb, which was quite different from what we eventually got. The player would have chosen between 3 main classes, each with 3 subtypes, similar to the lawful, the neutral, evil alignments from Dungeons & Dragons. Depending on the class, alignment, and progress, random events would trigger at specific points in levels. The game would have featured a massive central castle surrounded by different hub areas like swamps and caves. After exploring these zones, players would enter the castle to fight a dragon guarding a powerful artifact. The battle would cause the area to collapse, revealing a vast underground network of catacombs leading to the final boss, an evil Demilich.
A shadow has fallen across the world of Therion, for evil is upon us, for ages untold.
Hexen 2 moved away from the Doom engine to hop into the Quake engine, making it full 3D. At this point, the link to Doom was completely gone. The game took another step toward RPG elements while keeping first-person action as the main focus. It now featured 4 classes: the Assassin, the Paladin, the Crusader, and the Necromancer. Each had detailed bios, their own playstyle, and 4 unique weapons, just like in the previous game. You also had more detailed stats and could level up to level 12, which not only increased your mana and health, but also unlocked class abilities at levels 3 and 6. The level design was special. One new feature was that you could now destroy parts of the scenery, which was pretty cool. The maps looked great and were varied, but it was one of those "where the fuck do I go" kind of games. You'll get lost a lot, having to backtrack and search for tiny clues that are easy to miss. Combat and movement were also clunky. The first enemies you face, those archers and those stupid spiders that give me Daikatana PTSD flashbacks, you'll be lucky if you don't get hit. The Paladin is your melee fighter with the highest strength and health. At level 3, he gains water affinity, letting him swim faster and stay underwater indefinitely. At level 6, he unlocks Divine Intervention, giving him a chance to be revived after death with temporary invulnerability. The Crusader uses divine powers in battle. At level 3, he gains a chance to heal himself while fighting, and at level 6, Holy Strength gives him a chance to spawn an orb that temporarily increases his power. The Assassin's level 6 skill is by far her most important ability. It strengthens her attacks with the Qatar when striking from behind, encouraging her to move through the shadows and backstab enemies. The Sorcerer is your glass cannon. He has low health, but once he finds his spells, he can deal massive damage. His traits are somewhat similar to those of the Crusader. At level 3, he gains a chance to spawn health from defeated enemies, while level 6 grants a life drain ability to his sickle, allowing him to steal life from his targets. The mission pack Portal of Praevis introduces a 5th hero, the Demoness. She starts with the Bloodfire, the only hero weapon that's ranged and doesn't require mana. At level 3, she can slow her fall using her wings to avoid taking damage, and at level 6, she regains mana when hit while her health is low. Each level ends with a boss fight, each representing one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: death, war, pestilence, and famine. Once they're defeated, you reach the final level and fight Eidolon, the last and most powerful of the Serpent Riders. Probably because of his nipple ring, the mission pack ends with a battle against the Dark Wizard Praevis. The game was generally well received, but the most common criticism was how obscure it could be, not visually, but in terms of objectives. Some key areas or goals felt hidden, almost like secrets, with vague clues that made you wander around unsure of where to go or what to do. I also found the enemy count disappointing, much like in the previous Hexen with only 11 types, and most of them leaning more toward being annoying than actually fun to fight.
Long ago, a darkness fell on the lands of Parthoris.
Heretic 2 was developed by Raven Software and was the first game not published or associated with id Software, apart from licensing the Quake 2 engine. The game didn't do well, likely because it switched to a third-person perspective instead of first-person, which turned off a lot of players. The story continues Corvus' journey. After returning home, he discovers that a magical plague has spread across Partoris and that he's infected. The plague was created by Morkalevin, a mage from the supposedly long-gone Seraph race. Corvus must stop Morkalevin and find a cure to save his world.
Damn you!
I was able to try Heretic 2, but unfortunately, as you can see, playing it in the browser was horrible. So I had to rely on reviews and walkthroughs. I was surprised by how many enemies the game included, especially after the low count in Hexen 2. It's unfortunate, because as a game on its own, it looks pretty cool. I get strong Tomb Raider vibes from it, and it seems to run smoothly. Corvus has 4 weapons at his disposal, but can also cast both offensive and defensive spells, for a total of 9 options. With the Tome of Power making a comeback, that number essentially doubles. And as if that wasn't enough, you also have access to 10 artifacts and items, just like in the previous games. The game is divided into 4 hub levels, each connected by more linear transition areas. Each hub leads to several stages that end with a boss fight. The first hub will feel familiar, taking you back to Silver Spring, the city from the first game. Known as the City of the Damned during the Spiral's reign, Silver Spring was reclaimed by the Sidhe after the Serpent Rider's fall. The second hub is the Shithra city of Andoria. Due to their amphibious nature, many parts of the city were deliberately built underwater. The third hub is the Hive city of Kuchekrik. The insectoid Kuchekrik have carved a vast network of tunnels. They're not directly affected by the plague, but they attack any outsiders on site, fearing contamination. The fourth and final hub is the Cloud Fortress. Located high in the impassable World's End Mountains, the fortress was most likely an ancient Seraph outpost abandoned long ago and later reclaimed by Morkalevin. After the failure of the Spell of Ascension, it became his primary base of operations and the main bastion of evil in Partoris. The remaster released on August 7th, 2025, and that was a very good surprise. First off, if you already own the old games, you got it for free. Second, it's not just an HD update with improved graphics, they completely went back to reworked stats and behaviors for the weapons, enemies, and items. They also added new weapons, new episodes, and levels were reworked so that navigation and puzzles are less confusing. But what I felt was the coolest part was in Hexen, with the addition of a shield for the cleric. I guess someone played Dark Ages much. At first I was like, ugh, it's just a slow shield that blocks part of the damage. But then I blocked an attack at just the right time and the enemy staggered, and I was able to one-shot him with my mace. And you can also block and send back projectiles to their owner. That's awesome. Each game got one new episode, and while the one for Hexen was fun, I think the trophy goes to Heretic. The levels are great, you're thrown against a ton of enemies, many of which were tweaked, and there are plenty of tomes of power scattered around. That makes you feel less guilty about using one for something other than a boss fight. There are 2 new enemies, the Troll, who can charge at you, and the Draugr, similar to the Golem, but much faster. You also get a new weapon that was originally a second version of the Dragon Claw sprite, but here it's reintroduced as a second wand. Far more powerful than your limp baguette that does nothing, it fires trailing projectiles that fork toward nearby enemies like lightning bolts. And those empowered shots, that's some BFG power right there. The stat changes and the amount of ammo given make the gameplay faster and more action-focused than before, and I'm all for it. Hexen is also much more enjoyable this time. While the weapon count stays the same, and there's still no Tome of Power, the addition of markers and pointers to track objectives makes navigation far less confusing. Enemies are less bullet spongy, and the shield adds something genuinely fun to the cleric's gameplay. I would have loved to see something new added for the other classes too, but overall, it's a big improvement.